I'm Gavin, and welcome to MLS Fantasy Picks. Welcome back, everyone, to another year of MLS Fantasy. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you're a long-time subscriber, welcome back. I'm excited to get into the first round of MLS Fantasy. So as always, let's get started with some key considerations for the round. So with it being the first round of 2025, I normally don't go with the exciting new players that have been added to the league, and there have been a lot of changes this offseason. Also, I'm recording this right now the Sunday before the games start before the next weekend, and a lot of those new players aren't even in the game yet. So we'll give it a week. We'll see if they ended up getting added before the first round of games. But even if they were there, I'm more hesitant to add those new players. I try to go on much data that we have from last season, so you'll notice that in my player recommendations for this round. And no teams are on bye this week. There's no double game weeks. We've got all 30 teams playing this first weekend. And also be sure to keep an eye out for injuries and suspensions. Well, I'm not sure if there's any suspensions right now, but there are a good amount of injuries impacting some of the top players like Pooj and Paintsil. So that may open up some more budget options for us this week. So yeah, enough of that. Let's get into our player picks for the round. If you are new to the channel, let me give a quick intro to my weekly rankings video. So each week before the round, I'll go through my recommended keepers, defenders, midfielders, forwards, and a few captains picks. And for each of these positions, I'll go through different price points. So those premium picks, standard picks, your sort of average budget, and then your very cheap budget options. So I normally go through this, the first part of the season, maybe the first half, first 3/4 of the season. End of season, when budget really doesn't matter as much, I sort of just recommend my players for each position. But for right now, as we are quite focused on budget, especially this first round, I'll go through all the different price points for the different positions. For round one, I don't recommend spending too much money on your keepers, but I'll give you some options anyway. For premium, I'm recommending Lloris and Schulte. So Lloris from LAFC and then Schulte from Columbus. They have decent matchups. I'm not sure how Minnesota will be looking this year, but they do have good clean sheet chances this week. LA does against Minnesota. And then the Crew also have some good chances against Chicago Fire. Myself, I won't be spending that much money on keepers, but if it's something that you're looking to fit in your lineup, I recommend those two. And from a standard price point, I'll be recommending Galese from Orlando and Guzan from Atlanta. Though I hate to say it this season, I'm not too excited for how the Philadelphia Union are looking. A lot of changes, and Orlando looked pretty decent against Inter Miami, so I think it's a decent shout. Galese isn't too expensive. And then Guzan as well. I think Atlanta have got Montreal, also a good amount of changes. A lot of unknowns for this round. So I'm just trying to go based on, as much as we know from last season. And I think there's some decent options without spending too much money. And looking at the budget option, most likely what I'll be doing this week, Ustari is looking to be the starter. I think he started against Orlando in their preseason matchup. But I believe Calendar is still injured. So he's a $4 million, starter against NYCFC. A good option for that first part of a keeperoo as Miami starts off the week at 2:30 on Saturday. So a fair option. And honestly, I don't even think I'm going to have anyone sort of on the back end of my keeperoo just to free up as much money as possible. I was also looking at a DC keeper as they're playing Toronto this year, who I'm not sure how strong they will be. But yeah, I think Barraza right now is the only keeper for DC. Maybe they'll add in, a few of the other keepers, but we'll see. We'll see if they update the game. And now on to our premium defenders. So again, I won't be spending too much on my defense this year, this round. I don't want to speak for the entire year. But yeah, this round I'll most likely be putting in the majority of my funds for my midfield and forwards, and then still look for those teams with good clean sheet chances, but not necessarily their most expensive defenders. So I most likely will be looking at a more budget option than Orjano at Cincinnati, as I like Cincinnati versus Red Bull, Miami versus New York City as well. But if you want to spend that good amount of money, if you think these guys are going to do well on the attack, have a good clean sheet chance, I like them. So that's why Orjano, he absolutely crushed it last year, so a great pick, but he is very pricey at $8 million. Jordi Alba as well, always involved in the attack with Miami. And then Moreira and Farzi, sometimes playing that more attacking role for Columbus. And they're up against a very new Chicago team. Also, I don't know if you can hear the little one in the background, but I am a new dad. So yeah, you'll be hearing him throughout the season. So apologies for any background noise, but he wants to be part of the video sometimes too. So yeah, not as expensive as those first guys, but not too cheap. I like Yoshida. He's very strong in the back there for the Galaxy. 7 million against a new San Diego squad, so it could be a good fallback option. Amundsen, if he's starting against Chicago as well, not as pricey as your first two, but still a great option. And then Gallagher with Austin. I feel like Austin have made some good changes in the offseason, and Gallagher is one of those defenders who likes to get on the attack. He was pretty good last year, so we'll see how he is involved in this year's setup. And moving right along to our budget defenders. So this is most likely who I'll be looking at this round. So if Jones is starting, and again, all these recommendations could very well change depending how lineups look. We don't really know that much. We've always seen so far as preseason games, so we can do our best guesses. But I like Columbus, this week. He's one of their more budget options. If he starts, I do like Jones this week. Yedlin as well, as I said, I like sort of the budget option for those teams. He is only 6 million compared to Orellano's 8 million. And then Palencia as well. I like LAFC against Minnesota this week. If Palencia starts, who knows? But I still like some sort of budget defender option for LAFC. And then I feel like the best look in terms of starters possibly for this first round is Martinez at Miami. He didn't look great. I'm pretty sure he messed up against Orlando and they scored because of one of his, he got a miss hit or something in that preseason match. But yeah, I would still start him. I'll at least put him on the bench if he starts the 2:30 game. Hopefully he gets a clean sheet. But yeah, not too much risk there with a 4.5 million defender for the first week. All right, now an area where I'm actually looking to spend some of my money this week. We have our premium midfielders. So midfielders that I like this week are Evander. I know he's still with Portland. If he does, make that move to Cincinnati and in the game updates, I'll most likely be looking at Evander. I know he hasn't played with the team, but if he starts, I'm probably playing Evander, just how strong he was from a fantasy standpoint last year. Acosta, the same. I know Dallas is away at Houston, but this is, a Texas derby. Yeah, I like Acosta. I feel like he's going to do well in Dallas with that system, and he's just a great fantasy asset. Same with Heel. I know I normally don't throw out this many away midfielders, but I like their matchups, and I feel like with the offseason changes, New England's going to be a force to be reckoned with this season. I at least hope so. Heel is fun to watch, and he's a great fantasy asset. And then at the end, I've got Royce from LA. We also saw him last year. I feel like he'll look to step up at the beginning of this season, especially with Puig and Paintsel out. And now looking at our standard midfielders. So I like Moranchuk for Atlanta versus Montreal. I'm not looking yet at Almiron or some of the other additions this year, but I like that matchup, and I feel like Atlanta is going to be very strong on the attack this year. McGlynn, I feel like McGlynn may be our new Hector Herrera for the season. I think he'll play that spot quite nicely for Houston, and he's not too expensive. So yeah, we'll see how Jack does this season over at the Dynamo. Ojeda looked pretty good in that preseason matchup against Inter Miami. He is Orlando's 10 and only at 7.5 million, so I feel like he's a good look there with a Union squad who is in a bit of a rebuild at the moment. And Espinoza, I've always been a fan of, and he's at a great price point right now of 7.5 million. I'm also very excited about all the changes that took place for the Earthquakes this year. So I feel like we'll have some good fantasy options with Espinoza, with Chicho Arango, and possibly Martinez. So yeah, I like him as well. And another pick I'm looking at is Fagundes for the Galaxy with Puig and Paintsel on injury. I feel like Fagundes will look to step up in the first game of the season. I believe he's only at 7.5 million as well. And when it comes to budget midfielders this round, I feel like you have a good amount of options at like your standard and premium price points. And when it comes to these budget guys, at least for this part of the season, a lot of them look like your more defensive type of midfielders, which isn't really the look for fantasy. But Shambo, I think that's how you pronounce it, for Columbus, I think will be a great spot for Columbus with some of their, missing players like Cucho. So he'll look to step up. And again, I don't know if Pellegrino is going to start, but he should also benefit from the new additions to the Earthquakes. And at 6.8, if he's starting, he could be a sneaky pick. All right, so looking at our premium forwards, of course, Messi, definitely in the lineup this week. Buanga, pretty expensive, but he's Bouanga. It's LAFC versus Minnesota. I feel like that's a good matchup this year. And then Benteke. I feel like he's a decent shout as well. He might have started last year with a hat trick. But, they're up against Toronto. Good matchup, 8.5. He's usually a guy I put on my bench, so not someone I may be looking at this round. But yeah, still a good look. And moving on to our standard forward picks. So I definitely like Gabriel Peck this week. He will definitely be stepping up without some of their Galaxy players in there due to injury. Good matchup against San Diego. And of course, Chicho Arango. I like San Jose this year. Hopefully they live up to their expectations after making all their additions. And then J-Rod over at Portland. Though Portland will be missing Vander most likely, I feel like J-Rod is still a strong fantasy asset for the Timbers. And looking at our budget forward options, as I've been talking about San Jose quite a lot, I like Martinez. Hopefully he's starting. We'll see how that squad looks out top. Same for Ramirez. I'm not sure if he'll be starting for the Galaxy, but at only 7.5, if he is starting, that is a great look for a late forward option against San Diego. And again, another away player. I normally don't recommend too many away options for my weekly picks, but I like New England this year. I thought they did a really good job over the offseason, and they're playing Nashville, who aren't looking too strong. And I feel like Campana is really going to play quite well off of Heel and all of the other awesome players in attack for New England. And finishing things off with my recommended captain picks. Of course, Messi, if he starts, you have to captain Messi. That's just sort of the rule right now with MLS Fantasy. Not as fun, but just sort of how things go. If he's not starting, and Evander is starting for Cincinnati, I do like Evander. He's just been such a strong fantasy asset. Hopefully he does very well in Cincinnati this year. And then if neither of them, I like Peck. Peck is playing San Diego. He's done awesome at the Galaxy. I'm very excited to see what that team looks like this year. All right, so that wraps up my round 1 player recommendations. Like I said, I'm usually not one to recommend the new guys into the league. I like to see how they fit into, their new teams. And there's just been a lot of change in the league this year, so I like to go with those players that are sort of tried and true from a fantasy standpoint. Also note, I am recording this on Sunday before, games start next weekend. So a lot could change. We'll see if there's any new transfers. Hopefully the game updates and we've actually got some new players in. But be sure to subscribe. I upload in my YouTube shorts and my Instagram and TikTok my team reveal each week. I think like the Friday before the Saturday round of games. So be sure to subscribe. Follow me in those other channels. And yeah, as always, good luck.